Washington, November 8, 2024. The Federal Reserve raised the benchmark interest rate by 0.25%, marking its fourth increase this year to combat high inflation. The Fed chair stated this measure aims to control rising prices and support economic stability. The silence that followed Sarah's words felt heavy enough to crush starships. 300 species held their collective breath as the human ambassador stood alone on her platform, facing down the combined wisdom of galactic civilization. The chamber's environmental systems hummed quietly, the only sound breaking the unprecedented quiet. Chancellor Valdros clicked his mandibles nervously. In 3 centuries of council service, he had never witnessed such a direct challenge to established protocols. Ambassador Chen, while Earth's passion is notable, the council must base decisions on logical analysis rather than emotional appeals. The data clearly shows the data shows exactly what the devourers want us to see, Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining strength. Fear, inevitability, the illusion that we have no choice but to run. But I've spent the last 6 months studying every encounter with these machines, and I found something your tactical computers missed. The massive display screens flickered as Sarah's personal datapad synchronized with the chamber's systems. New information appeared alongside the threat projections, detailed analysis charts, energy signature readings, and structural assessments that had never been presented to the full council. The devourers aren't invincible. They're predictable. Sarah gestured toward the data streaming across the screens. Every attack follows the same pattern. They probe defenses, catalog resistance capabilities, then adapt their approach to counter specific threats. But they only adapt to what they encounter. They've never faced a species that fights back with genuine unpredictability. The crystalline collective's representative, a being of living gemstone whose thoughts created harmonic frequencies, resonated with skepticism. Human Chen ambassador. Your species has existed in galactic society for merely 2 centuries. The devourers have consumed civilizations that fought for millennia before succumbing. What makes you believe Earth's military doctrine could succeed where others failed? Sarah smiled grimly. Because every civilization that fought the devourers did so logically. They used proven tactics, established strategies, and conventional wisdom. They fought the way military academies taught them to fight. But humans didn't learn warfare from academies. We learned it from necessity, from desperation, and from a stubborn refusal to accept that any enemy is truly unstoppable. The chamber's environmental systems adjusted as tension increased among the assembled delegates. The Aquatic Alliance representative released a stream of bioluminescent particles into their communication sphere, signaling deep concern. Even if your assessment contains merit, Ambassador Chen, the risk remains catastrophic. One miscalculation could doom not just the 17 threatened worlds but potentially the entire Outer Rim. And guaranteed surrender dooms them anyway, Sarah shot back. You're asking me to accept that we should sacrifice billions of lives because the alternative is dangerous. But danger is not certainty. Fear is not fact, and being afraid has never saved anyone from anything. The hive mind delegation began their characteristic mental chorus, thousands of voices speaking in unison. The collective memory recalls the fall of the Architect Empire. They possessed technology superior to current council standards. The devourers consumed their greatest fortress worlds in less than a solar rotation. What weapon does humanity propose that the architects lacked? Sarah paused, knowing her next words would either rally support or confirm her species' reputation for dangerous irrationality. Creativity, improvisation, the willingness to try something that's never been tried before. Not because it's guaranteed to work, but because it's the right thing to do. She gestured again, and the display screens showed human military history. Footage of impossible victories where outgunned forces had triumphed through unconventional tactics. Cavalry charges against machine gun nests that somehow succeeded. Fighter pilots ramming bombers when ammunition ran low. Soldiers holding positions against overwhelming odds because retreat meant abandoning innocent civilians. Every species in this chamber fights intelligently, Sarah continued. You calculate odds, optimize strategies, and minimize losses. It's logical. It's efficient. And against the devourers, it's exactly what they expect. But humans don't always fight intelligently. Sometimes we fight stupidly, recklessly, with complete disregard for the odds or the consequences. The Titan delegate's voice rumbled with something that might have been amusement. Ambassador Chen suggests that irrationality is a viable military strategy? I suggest that the Devourers have never encountered true irrationality, Sarah replied. They've faced desperate last stands, yes. They've seen species fight to the bitter end when cornered, but they've never faced an enemy that chooses to fight when they could easily run. They've never faced warriors who charge into certain death not because they have to, but because someone needs to. Chancellor Valdros leaned forward on his platform. And what form would this irrational resistance take? Earth surely cannot face the Devourer fleet alone. Earth doesn't intend to face them alone, Sarah said quietly. We're asking you to stand with us. Not because victory is certain, but because the alternative is unacceptable. Not because the plan is perfect, but because doing nothing guarantees failure. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices as delegates began arguing among themselves. Translation devices struggled to keep pace with the rapid exchange of opinions in hundreds of languages. The environmental systems worked overtime as respiratory rates increased across dozens of species. Through the chaos, the Seraphim representative's melodic voice rose clearly. Even if we accept your premise, Ambassador Chen, the practical requirements for resistance remain insurmountable. The Devourer fleet numbers in the thousands. Our combined military forces, even if unified, could not match their firepower. Sarah raised her hand for silence, and surprisingly the chamber gradually quieted. You're thinking like generals planning a conventional war. But this isn't about matching firepower. It's about making the cost of victory higher than the value of the prize. New tactical displays appeared on the screens, showing unconventional battle scenarios that violated every principle of space warfare doctrine. Ramming attacks by ships whose crews had already evacuated. Booby-trapped facilities that would explode when the Devourers tried to harvest them. Guerrilla strikes against supply lines that didn't exist in traditional military thinking. The Devourers consume worlds for resources, Sarah explained. But what if those resources become poisoned? What if every victory costs them more than they gain? What if we make them work so hard for every planet that they decide to find easier targets? The Synthetic Coalition's mechanical representative processed this information with visible computing cycles. The proposed strategy assumes the Devourers will respond to cost-benefit analysis like organic civilizations. This assumption may be flawed. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but even machines follow logical patterns when the data supports different conclusions. And if we're wrong, if they keep coming no matter what we do, then we'll at least go down fighting. We'll make them remember that this galaxy contains species who refuse to surrender, who choose defiance over survival, who believe that some things are worth dying for. The Chancellor's compound eyes swept across the chamber, gauging the mood of the assembly. Support seemed split along traditional lines, the younger, more aggressive species showing interest while the ancient civilizations maintained their skepticism. Ambassador Chen, he said carefully, you speak of defiance and sacrifice as though they were virtues. But wisdom lies in preserving life, not throwing it away in gestures of futile heroism. Sarah straightened, her voice taking on a tone that carried across the vast chamber without technological amplification. Chancellor, with respect, there's nothing wise about watching 17 worlds die while we convince ourselves that cowardice is pragmatism. There's nothing virtuous about survival purchased with other people's lives. And there's nothing futile about standing up to bullies even when the odds are against you. She paused, looking directly at each major delegation in turn. In 6 hours, I will address this council again. At that time, I will formally declare humanity's position on the Devourer threat. I hope you'll use those 6 hours to remember that this galaxy belongs to all of us, and that some fights are worth having regardless of whether we can win them. The 6-hour recess transformed the council station into a hive of frantic diplomatic activity. Private chambers filled with heated discussions as species representatives contacted their homeworlds for emergency consultations. The normally serene corridors buzzed with translator, devices working overtime as informal. Coalitions formed and dissolved with each passing hour. Sarah found herself in the human delegation's secure conference room, surrounded by her team's worried faces. Admiral Martinez, Earth's military attaché, paced behind the curved viewport that showed the magnificent spiral of the Council's host galaxy. His weathered features reflected years of deep space combat experience. But even he seemed shaken by the magnitude of what they were contemplating. Sarah, I've run the numbers a dozen times, he said, his voice heavy with concern. Even with our most optimistic projections, we're talking about suicide. The Devourer fleet has enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Our combined forces might delay them for weeks at best. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the delegation's xenobiologist and strategic analyst, looked up from her data tablets. The Admiral's right about the conventional mathematics. But I've been studying the historical records Ambassador Chen requested from the Council archives. There's something the previous civilizations all had in common when they faced the Devourers. They all lost, Martinez said bluntly. No. Reeves shook her head. They all fought defensively. Every single engagement was about protecting something. Worlds, populations, infrastructure. They let the Devourers choose the time and place of battle. They reacted instead of acting. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, sensing an important insight developing. What are you thinking, Elizabeth? I'm thinking that maybe the key isn't to fight the Devourers at all. Maybe the key is to make them not want to fight us. Reeves activated the room's holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Look at their movement patterns. They're not random. The Devourers follow resource-rich paths through the galaxy, consuming worlds with the highest yield of usable materials. The display highlighted the projected route of the approaching fleet, a glowing line that threaded through systems chosen for their strategic and material value. 17 worlds lay directly in their path, each one representing billions of lives and centuries of civilization. But what if that path became less attractive? Reeves continued. What if we made those worlds cost more to take than they were worth? Not through direct military resistance, but through economic warfare on a galactic scale. Admiral Martinez stopped pacing. Explain. The Devourers are essentially a logistics operation, Reeves said, her excitement growing. They need raw materials to maintain and expand their fleet. They choose targets based on efficiency calculations, but those calculations assume the resources will be available for harvesting after conquest. Sarah began to see the shape of a plan forming. You're talking about scorched earth tactics. Deny them the prize they're coming for. More than that. Reeves nodded. I'm talking about turning their own efficiency against them. If we can make every world they approach a net loss instead of a net gain, they'll have to find new targets or risk depleting their own resources. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Martinez was the first to voice the obvious problem. Elizabeth, you're talking about destroying 17 worlds ourselves. That's not saving them. That's doing the Devourers' work for them. No, Sarah said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. She's talking about making the worlds worthless to the Devourers while keeping the populations alive. Evacuation with a purpose. Strip away everything they want and leave behind everything they can't use. Reeves nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. But it would require cooperation on a scale the Council has never attempted. Every species would need to contribute resources, ships, and expertise, and it would need to happen fast enough to stay ahead of the Devourer advance. The conference room's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming priority message. Sarah activated the receiver, and Chancellor Valdros's compound-eyed visage appeared in holographic form. Ambassador Chen, I trust your recess has been productive. Several delegations have requested preliminary discussions regarding your earlier statements. The Navari Confederacy wishes to understand the specific military commitments Earth would require. The Stellar Union seeks clarification on your strategic objectives. Sarah exchanged glances with her team before responding. Chancellor, Earth appreciates the interest of our fellow Council members. However, our position has evolved during the recess. We request permission to present our complete proposal to the full Assembly rather than engaging in piecemeal negotiations. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. Ambassador, the gravity of this situation requires careful diplomatic consultation. Surely Earth does not intend to proceed without building proper consensus. Chancellor, Sarah interrupted gently. With respect, consensus building is what got us into this situation. While we've been debating the proper diplomatic response, the Devourer fleet has advanced another light year toward innocent worlds. Every hour we spend in committee costs lives. The holographic image flickered as Valdros processed this response. Very well. The full council will reconvene in 1 hour. I trust Earth's presentation will be comprehensive. The communication ended, leaving the human delegation alone with the weight of galactic expectations. Martinez resumed his pacing, while Reeves continued refining her calculations. Sarah stared out at the galaxy beyond the viewport. thinking about the impossible task they were about to attempt. Her personal communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. President Morrison's recorded image appeared in miniature, her expression grave but determined. "Sarah, we've been monitoring the council proceedings through the quantum relay. The Security Cabinet has reviewed your reports and Dr. Reeves's preliminary analysis. We're authorizing you to commit Earth's full military resources to this operation, regardless of council support. The Joint Chiefs are already preparing deployment orders for the 3rd and 7th Fleets." Sarah felt a mix of pride and terror at her homeworld's backing. Earth was willing to risk everything on her judgment and her team's theoretical strategies. However, the President continued, "We want you to understand that this decision goes beyond military calculations. Earth's leadership believes that some stands must be taken regardless of the odds. We'd rather face extinction fighting for what's right than survive by abandoning others to their fate. Make that clear to the Council. This isn't about human bravado or tactical brilliance. This is about who we choose to be when everything is on the line." The message ended, leaving Sarah with a new understanding of the responsibility she carried. This wasn't just about saving 17 worlds or stopping the Devourers. This was about defining humanity's place in galactic civilization and determining whether that civilization was worth preserving. Dr. Reeves looked up from her calculations. "I've finished the resource projections. If we can get full council support, we can evacuate 93% of the threatened populations while simultaneously denying the Devourers approximately 70% of their expected resource gains. The operation would require the largest coordinated effort in galactic history, but it's theoretically possible. And if we can't get full council support?" Martinez asked. Sarah straightened her diplomatic uniform and checked her appearance in the room's reflective surfaces. "Then we find out how much damage a few determined species can do when they refuse to accept the unacceptable." The communication system chimed again, this time with an unexpected source. The display showed the elegant features of the Seraphim representative, her bioluminescent patterns dim with concern. "Ambassador Chen, I hope you will forgive this irregular contact. The Seraphim Concordat has been reconsidering certain aspects of your earlier presentation. We would like to discuss the possibility of limited cooperation in humanitarian efforts." More calls followed in rapid succession. The Aquatic Alliance inquiring about refugee management logistics. The Synthetic Coalition requesting technical specifications for resource denial operations. Even the traditionally isolationist Crystal Collective asking for clarification on timeline requirements. Sarah realized that something fundamental had shifted during the recess. The Council wasn't just considering her proposal anymore. They were beginning to believe it might actually work. "Admiral," she said as the flood of incoming communications continued, "how quickly can our fleets reach the threatened systems?" Martinez consulted his tactical displays. "At maximum burn, 18 days to the nearest world. But Sarah, if we're going to do this, we need to commit now. Every day we delay makes the evacuation more dangerous and the resource denial less effective." Sarah nodded, understanding that the moment for diplomatic caution had passed. In 1 hour she would stand before the Galactic Council and formally declare humanity's intention to fight. The question was no longer whether Earth would resist the Devourers, but whether the galaxy's greatest civilizations would stand with them or watch from a safe distance as humans charged into the dark. The council chamber felt different when Sarah returned to her platform. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and dread in equal measure. Representatives who had seemed resigned to evacuation an hour earlier now leaned forward in anticipation. The vast display screens showed real-time updates of the Devourer fleet's advance, each blinking dot representing a nightmare moving closer to inhabited worlds. Chancellor Valdros called the session to order with visible reluctance. His compound eyes swept the assembly as if counting allies and enemies in preparation for battle. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth. The floor is yours." Sarah stood at the edge of her platform, feeling the weight of 17 worlds pressing against her consciousness. Billions of lives hung in the balance of the next few minutes. She had prepared careful diplomatic language, reasoned arguments, and strategic presentations. Instead, she spoke from the heart. "6 hours ago, I stood here asking you to fight. I asked you to risk everything on the word of a species that many of you still consider young and reckless. I asked you to abandon 3,000 years of careful wisdom in favor of desperate action. And I gave you no concrete plan, no guarantee of success, only the promise that we would face extinction standing rather than running. The chamber remained utterly silent. Even the translation devices seemed to hold their breath. I was wrong to ask so much while offering so little. Sarah gestured toward the display screens, which began showing detailed schematics and operational timelines. So let me give you something more substantial. Let me give you Operation Pyrrhic Victory, a plan that can save every life in the threatened systems while denying the Devourers the resources they seek. The holographic displays came alive with three-dimensional tactical projections. Evacuation routes stretched between star systems like glowing arteries. Resource extraction timelines showed the systematic removal of valuable materials from threatened worlds. Most surprisingly, defensive positions marked locations where the remaining infrastructure would be turned into massive traps. The Devourers consume worlds for their mineral wealth, their energy sources, and their industrial capacity, Sarah explained as the displays shifted to show detailed resource analyses. But consumption requires time. They need to land harvesting equipment, establish processing facilities, and transport materials to their fleet. Dr. Reeves has calculated that each world represents approximately 47 days of harvesting operations. The crystalline collective's harmonic voice resonated through the chamber. Ambassador Chen proposes to deny them the 47 days. I propose to make those 47 days cost them more than they gain, Sarah replied. Every harvesting facility booby-trapped with antimatter charges. Every mineral deposit laced with compounds that will poison their recycling systems. Every energy source rigged to overload and damage their equipment. We turn their efficiency against them. The massive Titan delegate rumbled with what might have been approval. An expensive operation. The resources required for such comprehensive sabotage would strain multiple star systems. Less expensive than losing 17 worlds permanently, Sarah countered, and the operation serves dual purposes. While we're denying resources to the Devourers, we're evacuating populations to safety. Every mining charge we place allows our ships to extract another 1,000 refugees. Every trap we set buys time for our evacuation fleets. Admiral Martinez stepped forward to address the military implications. The Devourer fleet moves in a predictable pattern, consuming worlds in sequence rather than simultaneously. This gives us a critical advantage. We don't need to defend all 17 worlds at once. We need to make each world they approach a net loss while preparing the next world in line. The display screens showed the sequential nature of their plan. As the Devourers approached each system, specialized teams would complete resource extraction and population evacuation while preparing defensive surprises. The fleet would then advance to the next world, leaving behind a poisoned prize that would cost the machines more than they could gain. The Aquatic Alliance representative released excited bioluminescent patterns into their communication sphere. The logistics appear sound, but the coordination requirements exceed any previous galactic operation. The margin for error approaches zero, which is why this plan only works with full council cooperation, Sarah admitted. Earth can provide military escort and tactical coordination, but we need the Seraphim's transport capacity for refugee movement. We need the Synthetic Coalition's computational power for real-time operational management. We need the Titan industrial capability for rapid resource extraction. She paused, looking directly at each major delegation. Most importantly, we need something the Council has never attempted before. We need unanimous agreement to act decisively without endless debate. The Devourer fleet won't wait for committee decisions or diplomatic protocols. The Hive Mind delegation began their characteristic mental chorus. The collective calculates a 67% probability of operational success with full cooperation. These odds represent significant improvement over certain extinction through inaction. Chancellor Valdros leaned forward on his platform. Ambassador Chen, your plan requires council members to commit their most valuable assets to an operation with substantial risk. What assurances can Earth provide regarding command structure and decision-making authority? Sarah had anticipated this question, but the answer still felt like stepping off a cliff. Earth requests operational command for the duration of the crisis, not because we claim superior wisdom, but because this type of operation requires centralized decision-making. We can't coordinate a 17-system defensive action through committee consensus. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The idea of one species commanding council resources violated fundamental principles of galactic governance. Several delegates activated their communication systems simultaneously, seeking emergency instructions from their governments. The Seraphim representatives' wings fluttered with agitation. Ambassador Chen surely understands that such a request approaches impossibility. The sovereignty implications alone are irrelevant if we're all dead, Sarah finished bluntly. I'm not asking for permanent authority or political control. I'm asking for operational command during a crisis that requires split-second decisions across multiple star systems. When this is over, when the Devourers are gone, command authority returns to normal council structure. The Novari Confederacy's insectoid delegate clicked mandibles thoughtfully. What guarantees exist that Earth will relinquish command authority as promised? Sarah smiled grimly. The same guarantee that exists for any promise between civilized species. Trust. And the understanding that humanity has no interest in ruling a galaxy. We're too busy exploring it. Dr. Reeves stepped forward to address technical concerns. The operational timeline is crucial. We have approximately 36 standard days before the Devourer fleet reaches the first threatened system. Full evacuation and resource denial for that world requires 28 days minimum. We need your decisions now, not next week. The Chancellor's compound eyes swept the assembly one final time. The scope of this proposal exceeds normal council authority. Emergency protocols allow for immediate provisional agreement, subject to confirmation by member governments within 72 hours. We don't have 72 hours to waste on bureaucracy, Sarah said sharply. The Synthetic Coalition can establish quantum communication links with every member government within 6 hours. We can have binding confirmation before the first evacuation ships launch. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the decision crystallized. This wasn't just about fighting the Devourers anymore. This was about whether galactic civilization could adapt to existential threats without sacrificing its fundamental values. This was about whether 300 species could trust each other enough to act decisively when extinction was the alternative to unity. The crystalline collective's harmonic voice broke the silence. The crystal minds find merit in Ambassador Chen's proposal. We pledge our industrial capacity to resource extraction operations. The Aquatic Alliance followed immediately. Our deep space habitats will accommodate refugee populations. The Alliance supports operational unity. One by one, species representatives began announcing their support. Not unanimous agreement, but a growing coalition of civilizations willing to risk everything for the chance to save 17 worlds. The display screens tracked the commitments: transport ships, industrial equipment, military escorts, computational resources, and specialist personnel. Chancellor Valdros watched the unprecedented display of galactic cooperation with wonder and terror. Very well. By emergency authority vested in this council, I hereby authorize Operation Pyrrhic Victory under Earth Command. May whatever gods you worship have mercy on us all. Sarah felt the weight of 300 civilizations settle on her shoulders like a mantle of stars. In 36 days they would discover whether courage could triumph over certain destruction, whether unity could overcome impossible odds, and whether sometimes the right thing to do was also the smart thing to do. Admiral MVS, establish coordination protocols with all participating species. Chancellor. The Kepler 438 system buzzed with activity unlike anything in its billion-year history. Ships from dozens of species converged on the farming world of New Harmony, the first target in the Devourer's projected path. Agricultural settlements that had known only peace for 3 centuries now hosted military coordination centers and evacuation staging areas. Sarah stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, Earth's newest battleship, watching holographic displays track the largest humanitarian operation ever attempted. 3 million colonists needed evacuation. Vast farming complexes required resource stripping. Most challenging of all, the planetary infrastructure had to be converted into an elaborate trap while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Admiral, we have a problem with the Seraphim transports, reported Commander Torres, the operations logistics coordinator. They're designed for their own atmospheric requirements. The human colonists are experiencing respiratory distress during transport. Admiral Martinez consulted his tactical displays. How long to modify the atmospheric processors? 18 hours minimum, but that puts us behind schedule for the next phase. Sarah turned from the holographic tactical display showing Devourer fleet positions. The mechanical nightmare continued its steady advance, now 22 days from New Harmony. Patch me through to the Seraphim flagship. The elegant alien commander appeared in miniature hologram, her translucent wings shimmering with concern. Ambassador Chen, we are experiencing difficulties with atmospheric compatibility. Our engineers estimate significant delays. Commander Lyreley, Sarah interrupted. Forget the atmospheric modifications. We're wasting time on perfect solutions when good enough will save lives. Can your ships maintain minimal life support for 6-hour transits? The Seraphim's bioluminescent pattern shifted to indicate surprise. Certainly, but the discomfort levels for your colonists would be significant. Diplomatic protocols don't apply when people are about to be eaten by machines, Sarah said bluntly. Commander, I need those transports moving refugees in 2 hours, not 20. Discomfort is temporary. Death is permanent. Lyreley's wings fluttered in what Sarah had learned was the Seraphim equivalent of nervous laughter. Your species continues to surprise us, Ambassador. Very well. Transport operations will commence within your time frame. The holographic connection ended, leaving Sarah to face the next crisis. The command center's displays showed dozens of simultaneous operations across New Harmony's 3 continents. Titan industrial ships stripped mineral deposits while human engineers planted antimatter charges in their wake. Aquatic Alliance vessels evacuated coastal settlements while preparing underwater sensor nets to track devourer movements. Dr. Reeves approached with a data tablet full of concerning calculations. Sarah, we have a fundamental problem with the sabotage operations. The devourer's adaptive technology means they'll learn from each trap we spring. By the time they reach the 5th or 6th world, our surprises won't be surprising anymore. Sarah studied the tactical projections showing sequential trap effectiveness declining over time. So we make each trap different. Completely different. Force them to adapt to 17 separate types of threats instead of variations on the same theme. That requires 17 separate engineering teams developing 17 separate sabotage methodologies, Reeves replied. The coordination complexity alone is why we have the best computational minds in the galaxy working on this operation, Sarah finished. Patch me through to the Synthetic Coalition command vessel. The mechanical representative appeared with processing cycles visibly active. Ambassador Chen, we have been monitoring coordination requirements. The collective calculates optimal efficiency through specialized team assignments. Each world will feature unique defensive preparations designed by different species' tactical doctrines. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Elaborate. New Harmony will showcase human unpredictability through chaotic trap placement and psychological warfare elements. Kepler 442b will demonstrate Titan industrial might through massive infrastructure conversion. The Novari homeworld equivalent will feature hive mind coordination tactics never before documented. The displays shifted to show 17 different worlds, each with completely different defensive preparations. The diversity was staggering. Crystal-based resonance weapons, bioengineered viral attacks on machine systems, gravitational anomaly generators, and weapons so exotic they barely qualified as technology. Admiral Martinez studied the evolving plans with professional interest. It's brilliant. Instead of learning to counter one enemy, the devourers have to adapt to fighting 17 different species with 17 different tactical philosophies. More than that, Sarah realized, we're not just defending worlds. We're teaching the devourers that this galaxy contains threats they've never encountered. We're making them afraid of what they might face next. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from the devourer tracking stations. The mechanical fleet had begun deceleration maneuvers preparing for their assault on the Kepler system. But something in their formation had changed. Instead of the confident advance they had maintained for months, the ships now moved in defensive configurations. They're already adapting, Commander Torres observed. Their long-range sensors must be detecting our preparations. Sarah smiled grimly. Good. Let them worry about what we're planning. Fear is a weapon too, and it's one they haven't experienced before. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of coordinated chaos. Transport ships shuttled refugees to safety, while engineering teams completed their sabotage preparations. The pastoral farming world of New Harmony transformed into an elaborate death trap, disguised as a normal colonial settlement. Hidden beneath grain silos, Antimatter charges waited to vaporize any Devourer harvesting equipment. The planetary power grid had been rewired to deliver lethal feedback to any machine attempting to tap into the energy distribution system. Most cleverly, the orbital manufacturing stations had been converted into kinetic bombardment platforms, ready to rain destruction on the surface once the Devourers committed to landing operations. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the Defiance, watching the last transport ships depart New Harmony's atmosphere. 3 million colonists evacuated in 18 days. Impossible by any previous logistical standard, but humanity had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult when lives were at stake. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the advanced scout ships," Torres announced. "The Devourer fleet has dropped to sublight speeds. Estimated arrival at New Harmony in 73 hours. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. After weeks of preparation, the moment of truth approached. Signal all ships to withdraw to Phase 2 positions, and transmit the activation codes for our surprises. The command center's displays showed a three-dimensional view of the Kepler system as Allied ships moved to predetermined positions. They wouldn't contest the Devourer's landing operations. Instead, they would wait and watch as the machines walked into the most elaborate trap in galactic history. Dr. Reeves joined Sarah at the observation window. "Are you having second thoughts about this plan?" Sarah considered the question seriously. 300 civilizations had committed their most valuable resources, based on her promises and Earth's reputation, for dangerous innovation. If Operation Pyrrhic Victory failed, humanity would be remembered as the species that convinced the galaxy to commit suicide. "No," she said finally, "but I'm wondering what happens if we succeed. If we actually stop the Devourers, what does that mean for galactic civilization, for humanity's place in it?" Reeves smiled. "It means we'll have earned our seat at the adult table. No more being treated as the reckless children of galactic society." The observation window showed New Harmony's star growing larger as the Defiance maintained its vigil. Soon that peaceful system would become a battlefield between organic ingenuity and mechanical efficiency. Sarah had no idea who would win, but she knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy would never be the same again. "Commander Torres," she called to the bridge crew, "send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Operation Pyrrhic Victory is proceeding as planned. And tell them that win or lose, humanity's children are about to show this galaxy what we're really capable of. The next 73 hours would determine whether courage and creativity could triumph over overwhelming force." Sarah intended to enjoy every moment of the wait, because it might be the last quiet time any of them would ever experience. The Devourer fleet arrived at New Harmony like a plague of mechanical locusts descending from the void. Thousands of ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with harvesting equipment and adaptive weaponry. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the enemy fleet began its standard deployment pattern, completely unaware of the welcome that awaited them. "Contact in 37 minutes, reported Commander Torres, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to witness. "All Allied ships are maintaining Phase 2 positions at minimum safe distance." The holographic displays showed the Devourer fleet spreading across New Harmony's orbital space like a metallic infection. Their largest vessels, each 1 kilometers long, positioned themselves for optimal resource extraction. Smaller ships began atmospheric entry procedures, preparing to establish ground-based harvesting operations. Admiral Martinez studied the enemy formation with professional interest. "They're following textbook deployment doctrine. No variation from previous engagements. They really don't expect any resistance." Sarah activated the communication array to address the combined fleet. "All ships, this is Ambassador Chen. Operation Pyrrhic Victory enters final phase in 20 minutes. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them in this first encounter. We're trying to teach them that this galaxy bites back." Acknowledgements came from dozens of species in as many languages. The greatest Allied fleet ever assembled hung in space, like a constellation of hope and determination, waiting to see if 3 weeks of desperate preparation would be enough to save 17 worlds. The first Devourer ships touched New Harmony's atmosphere, their sleek forms cutting through air that had never known the scream of alien engines. Landing sites materialized across the 3 continents as massive harvesting vessels settled onto fertile farmland that had fed millions for 3 centuries. Energy signatures are spiking. Dr. Reeves reported from her sensor station. They're beginning power tap operations on the planetary grid. Sarah smiled grimly. Let them get comfortable. The deeper they dig, the harder it'll be to extract themselves when things go wrong. The Devourers worked with mechanical efficiency that was almost beautiful to observe. Within hours, they had established mining operations, tapped into the planetary power grid, and begun systematic resource extraction. Their confidence was absolute, born from thousands of successful conquests across the galaxy's history. That confidence lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. The first surprise came when a Devourer harvesting facility attempted to process grain from New Harmony's silos. The genetically modified wheat had been engineered to produce a compound that caused catastrophic corrosion in mechanical systems. Within minutes, harvesting equipment began dissolving from the inside out. First blood to the home team, Admiral Martinez observed with satisfaction as Devourer emergency signals flooded the communication spectrum. The second surprise followed. 30 minutes later, when power tapping operations triggered feedback loops in the planetary grid, massive electrical surges fried Devourer systems across 2 continents, turning sophisticated harvesting equipment into expensive scrap metal. But the third surprise was the masterstroke that made Sarah proud of her species' capacity for creative destruction. Orbital bombardment commencing, Torres announced as New Harmony's converted manufacturing stations revealed their true purpose. What the Devourers had assumed were industrial facilities suddenly transformed into weapons platforms. Kinetic projectiles rained down on the surface with devastating precision, targeting every Devourer installation simultaneously. The mechanical invaders found themselves under attack from the very infrastructure they had intended to steal. The enemy fleet responded predictably, sending ships to neutralize the orbital threats. But the manufacturing stations had been designed as sacrificial pieces in humanity's chess game. As Devourer ships closed in, the stations self-destructed with antimatter charges that vaporized attacking vessels in brilliant flashes of annihilation. Damage assessment is coming in, Dr. Reeves reported, her voice filled with amazement. Preliminary estimates suggest 63% loss of ground-based harvesting equipment and 18% casualties to their orbital fleet. Sarah felt a surge of fierce pride. And we haven't fired a single shot from our own ships. They're destroying themselves trying to harvest a world we turned into a weapon. The Devourer fleet's response revealed something unprecedented in their million-year history. Confusion. Their adaptive technology had no framework for processing a world that fought back through its own infrastructure. Ships circled in erratic patterns, unable to determine which targets were legitimate and which were traps. Ambassador, Commander Torres called from his station. We're receiving communication attempts from the Devourer command ship. They're trying to establish dialogue. The bridge fell silent. In all recorded encounters, the Devourers had never attempted communication with their targets. They had never needed to. Conquest had always been a simple matter of overwhelming force, followed by systematic consumption. Put them through, Sarah ordered, curious to hear what machines would say when their certainty was shattered. The voice that emerged from the communication system was synthesized but somehow conveyed genuine bewilderment. Unknown entities. Your defensive patterns do not conform to established parameters. What is your designation? What is your purpose? Sarah exchanged glances with her command staff before responding. We are the species you intended to make extinct. Our designation is irrelevant. Our purpose is to make you reconsider your choice of targets. A long pause followed, filled with electronic noise that suggested intense computational activity. Your resistance methodology is unprecedented. Cost-benefit analysis indicates continued. Operations in this system will result in net resource loss. This outcome was not previously calculated as possible. Then your calculations were incomplete, Sarah replied. This galaxy contains 300 species with 300 different ways of saying no to extinction. Are you prepared to face all of them? Another pause, even longer this time. When the Devourer voice returned, it carried something that almost sounded like uncertainty. Clarification required. Are you claiming defensive capability across multiple stellar systems? Sarah smiled. It was time for the galaxy's greatest bluff. We're claiming that every world you approach from now on will cost you more than you can afford to lose. The question is whether you're smart enough to find easier targets somewhere else. The communication channel went silent as the Devourer fleet processed this information. Their ships continued circling New Harmony's orbital space like predators, suddenly unsure of their prey's defenses. They're recalculating their entire operational strategy, Dr. Reeves observed. Long-range sensor data suggests they're conducting detailed scans of the next 6 systems in their projected path. Admiral Martinez nodded approvingly. Good. Let them worry about what we might have prepared for them. Fear is contagious, even among machines. The next 8 hours passed in tense standoff. The Devourers maintained their positions but made no further attempts to harvest New Harmony's resources. Their ships ran continuous sensor sweeps and transmitted massive amounts of data back to their main fleet. Finally, the alien voice returned to the communication channel. Cost-benefit analysis confirms continued operations in this stellar region will result in unacceptable resource expenditure. The fleet will seek alternative targets. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Are you saying you're withdrawing from this sector? Affirmative. The adaptive protocols indicate higher efficiency targets exist in unexplored regions. Your species and associated entities will be classified as unsuitable for standard harvesting operations. The Devourer fleet began withdrawal procedures with the same mechanical efficiency they had shown upon arrival. Ships disengaged from orbital positions and began forming departure formations. Within hours, the mechanical nightmare that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was retreating from a single world because humans had made conquest too expensive. Admiral, Sarah called to Martinez, signal all ships. Operation Pyrrhic Victory is a success. The Devourers are withdrawing from Council space. Cheers erupted across the bridge as the impossible became reality. 17 worlds had been saved. Not through military might, but through human ingenuity, and the courage of species willing to trust Earth's crazy plan. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The Devourers would return eventually, better prepared for the galaxy's new defensive capabilities. When they did, humanity and its allies would need to be ready, with even more creative ways to make conquest unprofitable. For now, though, the galaxy was safe. And 300 civilizations had learned that sometimes the best defense was making your enemy realize you weren't worth the trouble of destroying. 6 months after the Devourer withdrawal, the Galactic Council chamber had transformed into something unprecedented in its 3,000-year history. The once formal assembly now resembled a war room crossed with a diplomatic summit, where species representatives worked in rotating shifts to coordinate galaxy-wide defense initiatives. Sarah stood before the central holographic display, which showed a 3-dimensional map of known space dotted with new defensive installations. The 17 worlds that should have been consumed now hosted the most sophisticated early warning networks ever constructed. But more importantly, they served as symbols of what could be accomplished when civilizations chose unity over individual survival. The latest intelligence reports confirm our strategic assessment, announced Dr. Reeves, now serving as the Council's Director of Threat Analysis. The Devourer fleet has moved beyond our sensor range, but their withdrawal pattern suggests they're seeking targets in the outer void regions, where resistance is less likely. Chancellor Valdros, his compound eyes reflecting satisfaction mixed with lingering disbelief, leaned forward on his platform. Ambassador Chen, the Council has received formal requests from 47 additional species seeking membership. Word of our successful resistance has spread throughout the galaxy. Sarah nodded, understanding the implications. The Devourer crisis had revealed something remarkable about galactic civilization. When forced to choose between comfortable surrender and dangerous resistance, hundreds of species had chosen to fight. That revelation was reshaping political structures across known space. The new applicants bring valuable resources and unique capabilities, Sarah replied. But they also need to understand that Council membership now includes defensive obligations. We're not just a diplomatic forum anymore. We're a mutual protection alliance. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Traditional Council species struggled with the militarization of their peaceful institution. Newer members sometimes chafed at Earth's continued leadership of defensive operations. Most difficult of all, The success against the Devourers had created overconfidence among some species who believed they were now invincible. Admiral Martinez, recently promoted to Supreme Commander of Allied Defense Forces, gestured toward tactical displays showing fleet deployments across Council space. We've completed the first phase of the Distributed Defense Initiative. Every major system now hosts multi-species defense platforms designed using different technological approaches. The concept was purely human in its magnificent paranoia. Instead of standardizing defenses that future enemies could learn to counter, the Alliance maintained hundreds of different defensive systems based on each member species' unique capabilities. Any potential invader would face not one type of resistance but dozens of completely different threats. The synthetic coalition has finished modeling potential Devourer countermeasures, reported the mechanical representative, its processing cycle spinning at maximum efficiency. Probability calculations suggest a 78% chance that adapted Devourer forces could overcome conventional defenses. However, the same calculations show only a 12% success rate against our distributed defensive doctrine. Sarah smiled at the elegant solution they had stumbled upon. By refusing to create unified standards, the Alliance had made itself nearly impossible to defeat through adaptation. Any enemy would need to simultaneously counter crystalline harmonic weapons, seraphim biological defenses, Titan industrial might, human unpredictability, and dozens of other unique approaches. The hive mind delegation began their characteristic mental chorus. Long-range observation posts report unusual activity in the Andromeda approach vectors. Energy signatures suggest large-scale fleet movements, but the technological profiles do not match Devourer configurations. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Devourers weren't the only threat in the universe. Success against one enemy might have attracted the attention of others. How long before we have detailed analysis? Sarah asked. Approximately 6 standard days for preliminary assessment, the hive minds replied. Full threat evaluation will require 2 to 3 weeks. Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Earth's leadership of the Alliance had been accepted during the Devourer crisis. But that acceptance came with the burden of making decisions that affected hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. Admiral Martinez, begin preparations for Threat Response Protocol 7. All defense platforms to elevated readiness. Dr. Reeves, coordinate with the intelligence networks to gather additional data on these energy signatures. The chamber buzzed with activity as species representatives began implementing emergency procedures that had become routine over the past 6 months. The peaceful diplomatic protocols of the old council had given way to efficient crisis management systems that could respond to galactic threats within hours instead of months. Chancellor Valdros approached Sarah's platform with something approaching reverence. Ambassador, the Council wishes to formalize a proposal that has been under discussion for several weeks. We would like to offer Earth permanent leadership of the Alliance Defense Forces. Sarah paused, considering the magnitude of what was being offered. Permanent military leadership of the galaxy's greatest civilizations represented unprecedented authority for any single species. It also represented unprecedented responsibility. Chancellor, Earth appreciates the confidence this proposal represents, but permanent authority violates the principles that made this alliance successful in the first place. We accepted emergency command because the crisis required unified decision-making. Now that we've proven the concept works, it's time to establish rotating leadership based on current threats and situational expertise. The Seraphim representative's wings shimmered with approval. Ambassador Chen's wisdom continues to exceed expectations. Leadership should serve necessity rather than tradition or convenience. The proposal sparked heated debate across the chamber as species representatives discussed the implications of rotating military command. Some argued for stability through permanent Earth leadership. Others insisted on democratic rotation. A few suggested specialized leadership based on threat type. Dr. Reeves approached with an urgent data tablet. Sarah, we're getting preliminary analysis from the long-range sensors. You need to see this immediately. The holographic display shifted to show deep space sensor readings from the galaxy's edge. Energy signatures moved in formations that suggested massive fleets, but the technological profiles were unlike anything in Council databases. They're not mechanical like the Devourers, Reeves explained quietly. The energy patterns suggest organic technology, but on a scale that dwarfs anything we've seen. And they're definitely heading this way. Sarah studied the data, recognizing patterns that reminded her of Earth's own early space exploration efforts. Curious probing rather than aggressive advance. Scientific investigation rather than military conquest. They might not be hostile, she said thoughtfully. These movement patterns suggest exploration rather than invasion. But exploration fleets this large usually indicate civilizations, with resources that make the devourers look like pirates. The chamber had quieted as other representatives noticed the urgent consultation between Earth's leaders. Chancellor Valdros clicked his mandibles nervously. Ambassador Chen, should the council prepare for another crisis? Sarah looked around the chamber at the faces of 300 species who had learned to trust each other during humanity's darkest hour. They had proven that unity could overcome impossible odds. Now they faced the question of whether that unity could survive contact with powers even greater than themselves. Not crisis, Chancellor. Opportunity. Sarah's voice carried across the chamber with growing confidence. If these newcomers are peaceful, we'll welcome them to the greatest alliance in galactic history. If they're hostile, we'll show them what happens when you threaten a galaxy that's learned to fight as one. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the Alliance's defensive networks. 6 months ago, we were 300 separate civilizations preparing to abandon 17 worlds to mechanical monsters. Today we're a unified force that turned the galaxy's greatest threat into a tactical withdrawal. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The chamber erupted in agreements from dozens of species as representatives committed their fleets to whatever challenge approached from the void. Sarah watched the display of unity with quiet satisfaction, knowing that humanity had given the galaxy something more valuable than defensive victories. They had given it hope, and hope, Sarah had learned, was the most powerful weapon any civilization could possess. The unknown fleets continued their approach through the dark between galaxies, but for the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization waited to meet them without fear. Whatever came next, the Alliance would face it standing together, united by the simple human belief that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the odds. In the end, that might be humanity's greatest gift to the stars. The stubborn refusal to accept that any fight was hopeless as long as someone was willing to throw the first punch.